Hi, welcome to the channel. Welcome back if you are a current subscriber. Today I'm analyzing what a victim looks like versus someone who is perhaps being deceptive. Please keep in mind that this will be a bit sensitive, so a bit of a trigger warning there. Also, I'm not here to victim blame, just to let you know what I'm observing that could be an indication that someone is perhaps being deceptive. The first person I'm going to analyze here is Jordan Turpin, and she was the victim of torture at the hands of her parents, along with her other 12 siblings, I believe it was. They have since been charged, and let's get into it.
To find out, she escaped her parents, who later pleaded guilty to a number of crimes, including torturing their children.
You walked out of a house into a world you had no idea what it was, what it looked like, what people were, who people were, what a police officer was, none of that.
Yeah.
That must have been, like, unbelievable.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
I'm not going to get too much into it, but it was the motivation of saving my siblings and I, because I don't know what would have happened if we just stood for even another year, because it was just getting worse.
When she escaped, she was 17.
So a few things here I want to note. There's a lot of emphasis in her eyebrows. There is a lack of illustrators, and you'll see that throughout her interview. And I will leave the full link of that interview in the description box below, but you'll see a lack of illustrators. Now that could, in some contexts, in some situations, be an indication someone is being deceptive, because as you see that I'm doing right now, people often speak in emphasis with their hands in relation to what they're saying. If there's anything off there, it's not in relation to what they're saying. There's something that just isn't congruent there that could indicate deception, but on its own, it's not an indication someone is automatically lying. And that's really what I want to point out in this particular interview. She has this lack of illustrators, but she's also more withdrawn. She also emphasizes with her eyebrows. She's bouncing a bit nervously there, some adapters, some self-soothing behaviors. And we're not seeing glabella furrowing, that there's muscles there between the eyebrows. We're not seeing real grief muscles, but she's also not launching into a really traumatic part of what took place. And so it makes sense that we might not see those real grief muscles there. But we do see emphasis, and we see her withdraw a bit within herself to remember what took place. Her looking down, usually to the left or right, indicates it's more emotional. And this cluster of behaviors where she's withdrawing, and so it makes sense that she would not have these other movements. She's also not elaborating on a victimhood narrative, not really playing into victimhood, making sure that she is known as a victim of the situation. Her emphasis verbally is more on saving her siblings, what's important to her, and what she knew and what she did not know. Now, that's not to say that all victims who elaborate on what they went through are lying or being deceptive. Just what I'm noting here is that she does not really elaborate on horrific details, and especially not in making herself a victim of a situation that truly was horrific.
I think I've come a long way, and I've grown a lot. I'm definitely grown a lot into my own person.
The drive that drove you out of that house, that's driving who you are now and the future you're trying to create.
Yeah.
This past year, she's been on magazine covers.
She also has a normal blink rate throughout most of this interview, and I'm sorry it's in very tiny clips here and there, but that's just the nature of this particular interview. And what I'm seeing is this emphasis again with just her eyebrows, lack of illustrators, but we're also seeing a lack of her self-grooming behaviors, touching of the face, venting any shame. She's not looking down and covering that vulnerable part of her body for the sake of guilt or shame. She's looking down this direction. She's emotionally recalling events, emotional eye accessing there, and her emphasis is in eyebrow flashes, and her movements there are adapters. She's self-soothing a bit. She's a bit nervous. Understandably, this is the recalling of a traumatic event and the night that she called 911 when she was 17, saving her siblings from continued torture by the hands of her parents. There's a normal blink rate. She's not just staring down the interviewer. She's not shifting eyes. She's not eye blocking. There's no aversion there. All of these clusters indicate that she's being very honest about the situation. And we're seing a lack of duper's delight. We're seeing a lack of micro micro-expressions that indicate contempt or disgust or a smirk or anything where we should not see it. And to clarify, I don't mean that Duper's delight is disgust or contempt. It's very much not. It's just along the lines of micro-expressions. That's what we might see. Contempt or disgust, which in this context would make sense, but we're not even seeing that. We're seeing her just withdraw within herself, and an emphasis in other areas that we don't typically see. This behavior that's individual to only her, and how she expresses and emphasizes things that we need to pay attention to, which is why it's important to establish a baseline. Very difficult to do in interviews like this where you only get to see Jordan in very short, intense clips, but it's important to establish what might be individual to the person, what might be emphasis in other areas, and not just focus on one specific behavior.
But I smelled bleach. I know the smell of bleach. And I saw on my sweatshirt, it had marks on it, like spots on it when you have a bad bleach job. So then I was like, there's bleach on me too. So when the police came, I kept the clothes on. I kept the rope.
So you had the rope on the entire time?
I mean, it wasn't like wrapped around, but yeah, it was around because I wanted them to see. I wanted them to see what this was. I told them what happened, everything. I also asked them to turn their body cams off because they were trying to stay in the hallway. And I was like, please just come in. Like, I don't want a big scene with my neighbors and with like the second round of police officers.
This is someone who staged a hate crime and has since been found guilty of doing such. And sometimes we see emphatic movements where we should see it. We see illustrators, which are hands movements in relation to what you're saying, and emphasis to what you're saying. And sometimes we see that, and we see clusters of behavior that display honesty, but leave out other details, or clusters of behavior we should be seeing that actually indicate more that someone is guilty of something, and indicates deception, even though the person is not necessarily directly lying. And that's what we're seeing here with Jussie. We're seeing emphatic movements, eyebrow flashes, and illustrators where we should see it, but we're also seeing a lack of behaviors that we should see. Contempt, fear, shame, nothing going on with his head going down, covering that vulnerable part of his body. We're not seeing real grief muscles, glabella furrowing there between his eyebrows. We're not seeing any indications of fear. And I also want you to pay attention to the pop rubble fissures, the opening there between the eyes, especially in both Jordan Turpin and Jussie Smollett's interviews.
Happened if we just stood for even another year.
With Jordan, you see the widening of those palpable fissures, indicating real fear or feelings that something might be absurd. You see that there. You don't see that here. He's not in any real fear, contempt, anger, no surprise, nothing going on that indicates this was a surprise attack. This was something that he did not expect at all. And then you see the Duper's delight, the micro-expression, the smirk there that creeps along his face as he says that he didn't want to cause a scene with the neighbors, but then he also verbally expresses that he kept a rope around his neck, not tight, just enough that someone can see that he was allegedly the victim of something. He also outlines horrific details, the smells of things. This isn't someone who was trying to get away from a situation. It's someone who kept parts of the crime scene attached directly to themselves. It's not something you would expect to see from someone who is genuinely a victim of something like an attack. And we also see some aversion there. His eyes shift downward that way, not downwards in any emotional eye accessing, but away from the camera. So we see some real aversion there that we should not be seeing.
At what point did you make that decision that killing your mother was the only way that you could be free?
I want to say it was around the time that I felt like I had tried to exhaust all the options that I thought was available to me. So I ran away from home. She found me back within 4 hours of being gone. She had chained me to a bed, and there was a lot of physical abuse, for 2 weeks. So I felt like I had learned my lesson, that was not a route that I could take. And so then,
just like Jussie Smollett, we're seeing a lot of the same behaviors with Gypsy Rose. So things that emphasize the significance of some things, some illustrators in relation to things and emphasis of things that would make someone believe that genuinely just telling the reality of the situation. But we're seeing a huge lack of behaviors yet again that we should see in people like Gypsy Rose, Jussie Smollett, people who have been found lying about things that they should not have lied about, that other people have genuinely been the victim of. So again, the palpable fissures, you're not seeing any whitening. You're not seeing any indications of contempt, any micro expressions there, raising of the lip, scrunching of the nose, downward glabella furrowing there. We're not seeing all these indications that there is any fear, contempt, disgust, anything there. We instead see a smirk, a micro expression called Dubra's delight. We see that dopamine release when she believes that she is getting away with telling something that is not honest here. We also verbally hear a lot of elaboration, a lot of extra words, things in between what happened. And so we hear her put a lot of distance between what was real and what was not real here. For example, she does not take direct ownership over the situation. She does not say, I did this, my mom did this. She says instead, the abuse was real, the finances, and she uses that word the to really fill in the space between what took place and who did what. So there's no direct ownership there. And again, with the lack of raising of the palpable fissures there, we have some eyebrow flashes, but they're not where we should see them. They're not congruent with what she's verbally expressing here, where she was the victim of the situation. We're seeing illustrators, but we're not seeing genuine fear or any indication that she actually was afraid in this situation. No disgust or contempt, but instead a smirk. So this interview is very similar to Jussie Smollett's own interview, and he has since admitted to staging an attack, a hate crime, and Gypsy Rose here has been caught in several lies. Then there's Jordan Turpin at the beginning there, where you genuinely see indications she withdraws within herself. She's not happy to talk about what took place. She doesn't elaborate. There's no distancing language. There's widening of the palpable fissures where we should see it. And there's a lack of illustrators, but she was bouncing around, and that withdrawing within herself would cause her to not have all these uplifting of movements that you might see in other situations. Context is very important when it comes to analyzing body language, because some things sometimes could indicate deception when it's not congruent with what is verbally being expressed, as opposed to other situations where that very lack of movements or widening of palpable fissures might actually indicate someone's being honest. So one particular movement does not indicate someone's being dishonest. Aside from that, you always look at clusters, look at context, look at what's being verbally expressed versus the behavior. So I'm going to end this here. Hopefully that has helped. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching.